Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching SDTV. If you take everything in economy, food is that essential item that if the food security is disturbed, it becomes very difficult to run the country, even on the fiscal side, even on the monetary side. So countries do take food security and food safety very seriously. Pakistan is a blessed country. It has canal command area or a very large area in Punjab and Sindh as well. And even up to now, we have a lot of water. And canal command area, if it distribute according to the needs of the food, can produce supple crops. And at times, I know that they have produced, those areas produce sufficient crops, millions of tons of wheat and 3.5 or 5 million ton of rice and other things. And that ultimately translates into nutrition and national health, and that translates into productivity, and that is economy if we correctly think. That is the that is the chain. But there are a lot of other factors that can disturb, that can supple, or they can weaken this change. Fiscal side is one of them. Trade policy is another thing. Import and export policy on specific items and commodities, another thing. So it's not an easy thing. You need to understand trade, fiscal, agriculture policy at the same time and then come out with a policy that is sufficient for a good policy on that. What is that good policy and how to do it? We have today with us a very eminent scholar on that. He has served as the National Economic Advisor in Ministry, and personally before that he was doing this economy thing and other things with a very large bank that would dole out support to different projects. And even now he's advising sovereigns all over the world on different things, especially on the fiscal side and trade also. We have today with us Sakib Sherani. Sakib, very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Say something on this food thing, which you had been, I know, had been working on that for the last couple of months or maybe a year, and then we'll rumble on as a basic premise.
Right. Thank you. I think, Tahir, you've sort of sketched, the issues quite well in your preamble. The issue is, especially when I talked about Pakistan, I think the key thing is that Pakistan is such a large agrarian economy. But despite that, the prevalence of undernourishment and food insecurity is fairly high for a country like Pakistan. In fact, if you look at the numbers, it's not a very happy sort of situation for a country the size of Pakistan. So about 21% of the population, is undernourished. The prevalence of undernourishment in Pakistan is significantly higher than South Asia, which is roughly about 14%, or the average for low and income, middle income developing countries. So Pakistan is an outlier there as well. If you look at moderate to severe food insecurity, for example, it's about 45% in the case of Pakistan. So 45% of the population experiences moderate to severe food insecurity, which is once again significantly higher than the region or the cohort of low income and middle income developing countries. If you look at the impact, because obviously nutrition is, as you mentioned, is such a central and a vital part of the health of a population, but not just the health of the existing generation. It's an intergenerational issue.
Yeah.
And it's an issue that affects future, the development of future generations, and therefore the prosperity of the country going forward as well. And there's a gender aspect, there's an income aspect, and there's also a spatial geographic aspect. We'll talk about these. But if I just talk about the impacts of, not being able to provide for various reasons, which we'll talk about, obviously, which we've outlined in the report as well, why we've been unable to provide a certain level of nutritional security to our population. So, but if you just look at two things, it's very sad that 34% of the cohort of under 5 children in Pakistan are stunted. 7% of this cohort is wasted, which means that they're not going to, unfortunately, even with interventions, be able to recover. Now, this is,
Fairly large.
it's once again we're an outlier. It's very large. Now, the impact of this one is you're wasting your future generation, clearly, right? So you're not, we have to focus on this. The other thing is because of this, the World Bank points out that the learning poverty outcomes are off the charts. So we are outliers in all the other things, but the learning poverty outcomes, we are off the charts. So 74% or 75% of the under 10 cohort in Pakistan exhibits really significant or severe learning poverty, right, as defined by the World Bank. So that means that this cohort is your next generation, right? So we really, this is an issue that needs to be tackled with an urgency. That we're seeing the government respond over the last few years. They're taking a multi-sectoral approach, which we didn't have in the past. Obviously, the fact this is a very important SDG, a commitment that we have to meet of zero hunger, sustainable agriculture, that contributes to this focus. But still, there's a long way to go before we get our head around this.
Do you think that making the fiscal and especially the trade policy can affect it?
Of course, they're absolutely critical because this is obviously a multifaceted, complex, multifaceted, policy environment, or I would say a policy issue. Because we're talking about sustainable agriculture as well. So we're talking about stability of domestic food systems as well. We're talking about impact from global environment. We're talking about impact from climate change. But really, at the heart of this, what the government can do is, I think, a few things. Central to this is fiscal and trade policies, but there's some issues that are also related to governance. For example, in our report, one of the key recommendations is to make food security a rights-based. So there has to be it has to be a constitutional rights-based approach that we need to take, like India has done, for example. So we guarantee that every child, every woman, every person in Pakistan will be guaranteed a certain level of the minimum, requirement for calorie intake, 2,330 or 2,400 calories or whatever, and a balanced, diversified diet. So so this is not specifically to fiscal policy and trade policy. There are interventions that we need to take, which are governance related as well. But many of the interventions are in the domain of the fiscal side and the trade side. So to give you one example, on the fiscal side, for example, we're only spending 0.06% of GDP. I'll repeat that number, 0.06% of GDP on nutrition-specific spending. And a large bulk of that is actually related to your Ramzan packages, which only last for about a month, right? So 11 months of the year, the government is not really allocating anything to nutrition specific, and not just as government, I'm talking about. So we did one of the things that we did in the report was a 10-year review of expenditures, both nutrition specific and nutrition, sensitive expenditures. And this was the key thing. We're roughly spending around 0.06%, 7%, 8%, not more than in this range for over a period of 10 years. And it's all related to seasonal expenditures, related to Ramzan packages. So 11 months of the year after Ramzan, or before Ramzan and after Ramzan, the food insecure population doesn't get any specific allocations from public expenditures. So that's something that's clearly in the fiscal side that we need to address.
When it comes to accruals, when we are spending money on, especially on the food, there are so many things which are very closely related, but we need to understand the difference between them. For example, we say nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive. What is the difference?
So nutrition specific is directly related to consumption, right? And directly related to nutrition of that, the cohort that we're talking about, or population generally.
Calories.
So it's providing them with food, but let's say through BISP, the Nashanama program, and BISP, a school meals program, that's the other part of a recommendation that Pakistan really needs to see. The kind of spending Pakistan is doing, it's not just the level of spending. It's also the seasonality of spending, the volatility of the spending, and also the nature of the spending that we need to change. So, for example, we're focusing on specific vulnerable districts. Now, this is a very different approach from India and Indonesia, for example, or Brazil, where they run national school meal programs, right? So every child in a public school gets a certain, specific degree of calories, specified calories, a specified diversified diet. It's guaranteed. So it's in Brazil, it's in Indonesia, it's in India, and many other countries as well. So rather than run pilot programs, this is the favorite of Pakistani bureaucrats. Let's run a pilot program. Let's pick up one village and make it. We need to upscale our efforts. It has to be a national effort because the kind of numbers that we spoke about a bit earlier, they're affecting the entire population. And our future generations. So we need to, so to answer your question, that's nutrition specific expenditure. So Ramzan package means that we are spending on certain, let's say, spending at the utility stores corporation, for example, sugar, flour, atta or ghee or whatever, that's subsidized for Ramzan. That's nutrition specific. Nutrition sensitive is that in the wider scheme of things, anything that could have an impact on food stability, food availability, affordability, not directly spending on nutrition as such, but in an indirect way, spending on the entire ecosystem that would produce outcomes.
Even on incomes.
It could be incomes, but it could be, let's say, farmer support. It could be, subsidizing mechanization of, so improved yields. It could be spending on, agriculture extension services or research and development of new seeds. All that would be then classified as nutrition specific because ultimately it impacts productivity, yields, affordability, availability, etc.
So in a nutshell, you're saying that food system should be improved overall.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we cannot, that's the way forward.
That's right.
So, but when we are talking about the food systems, then agriculture is very central and essential. Do you think?
It's the key, obviously, because that's the producer of your, entire. And there, another of the recommendations we have, unfortunately, because in the last 2 years we've seen under the IMF pressure, we've actually moved back from a central tenet of our agriculture policy for 78 years, which is support the farmer, right? So the farmer, generally in Pakistan's history, barring a few, let's say, periods or whatever, but generally, we've had a policy where we've supported farmers and producers over urban consumers. Now, we've suddenly flipped without, so we've said, we've withdrawn from procurement, for example, and now we've reinstated that. But this kind of volatility is really, very disturbing for production and stability of the food systems. So one of the central recommendations of the report also is that we need policies that are far-reaching, look beyond the horizon, that are stable, that are predictable, and try to balance the interests of producers versus consumers.
We just talked about the nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive. Can we support all these efforts if we look at the 10-year or at some horizon, the expenditure the government has been accruing on these things?
So what we found is that for this particular year, this budget, we looked at both federal and provincial spending because, as you know, obviously, food security, nutrition are actually devolved subjects now, right? Yeah. So we need to look at, when we look at total expenditure. So I mentioned 0.06% was nutrition specific. That was the federal part of it. if you add the provinces and the federal spending on both nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive expenditures, it totals about 1.3% of GDP, which is still far below what we require. In our estimation, so I'm not a food expert. I'm more of a, as you know, fiscal expert. But roughly from what I've looked at, different reports and spoken to key sort of experts on the agriculture side, we need to spend nationally about 4 to 5% to get our nutrition and food security right. So we're spending 1.3%. But when you look at over a 10-year period, our 10-year period review was only on federal expenditures.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, and there we found that the bulk of it was actually BISP. So it wasn't nutrition specific in that sense, because BISP, only a small portion now is allocated to the Nashanoma program, which is geared towards pregnant and lactating women. And it's only about 8.5 billion or 8 billion rupees allocated therefore. So the recommendation is that we really need to expand the quantum of spending and the quality of spending. The other thing that I want to point out is, like I mentioned earlier, so the really vulnerable cohorts are obviously children, young children, pregnant women, lactating women. And then there's like I said, there's a geographic and a spatial dimension to it. There's a regional dimension to it as well. So when you look at, for example, undernourishment, it's heavily concentrated. So the national number, 21% prevalence of undernourishment, actually masks some very severe regional imbalances. So, for example, when you look at ex-FATA, you look at Gilgit and Baltistan, the prevalence of undernourishment is 58% and 56%. Balochistan, about 56% of the population is undernourished. So really, all these dimensions we've tried to bring out in the report. And when we spend, the government needs to spend, in a more focused manner on these vulnerable cohorts and regions as well.
Yeah. So you understand that most of it's a policy issue.
It is.
It is policy.
It is.
Is there are slippages and gap in implementation as well? And when we can, because quantitative, measure very much depends on, because what you're funneling in should reach.
I think there is that element with any spending. There's another element, which is that, under the IMF program, we've actually viewed nutrition, both nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive expenditures, other than BISP, as unprotected spending. So when they ask for a cut on through fiscal austerity, they ask for so we tend to cut development spending, we tend to cut spending on vulnerable cohorts, subsidies for vulnerable people. That's the other part of the recommendation, is that we need to protect these, not just grow these expenditures in a quantum way, but also protect these expenditures from cuts under the IMF. One other recommendation, is related to what you're saying, is that we need better national coordination. So everybody is working in silos, both the provinces and the national thing. We have these goals. Everybody is working towards fulfillment of the SDG, number 2, related to hunger. But we're doing it in silos. So there has to be a national coordinated effort, that we need to run.
The thing is, we cannot change everything overnight. We must make a policy which is inclusive of everything through the food system. We must understand horizontally and vertically what the food systems are, because if we are going to understand what the food systems are, how to keep them, how to improve them, how to make them supple, and how to make them deliver, we are going to change. We are going to bring good policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, that is import of commodity, export of commodity, and the time of import and exporting the commodities like pulses and sugar and everything. With this, we come to the end of the program. Bye for now.